Hello and welcome to A Critical Dragon, where I talk about narrative in film, television, and in books. And today, I want to talk about the very complicated morality of Malazan. And this is going to have spoilers for Deadhouse Gates, and I'm going to be speaking about Baudin. Now, before I get started on this, I am not in any way excusing the behavior that Baudin is depicted as performing in the text. And I want to make this very, very clear. The morality presented in Malazan is quite often a challenge to get us to think through aspects of morality. And this involves the discussion of complex issues, difficult issues, and of trying to parse the difference between acts that we find reprehensible. And one of the questions that the series poses quite frequently is, can any act ever be forgiven? Can people find forgiveness, or can people redeem themselves or be redeemed? Can we understand people, understand their motivations, understand their positions, even if it means we do not forgive, nor do we condone their actions? All of these are complex questions. And I think Baudin is a fascinating character for this, because Baudin in Deadhouse Gates is not a good person, but some acts he commits are good, are heroic. Some acts he commits are villainous and are bad. And it is not a simple binary. Morality in Malazan is complex and is actually getting down into those areas that are uncomfortable to look at, because we're trying to make judgments between this space and this space. So what I mean by this is, in the prologue to Deadhouse Gates, Baudin brutally murders an old woman with chains and beheads her. This is a barbaric, evil, disgusting, immoral act. He murders an old woman. However, Baudin did so to cow the crowd, protect Felison, whom he had been instructed to protect, and this was a way of doing it. It was a practical and pragmatic decision. So his intention was to protect Felison. A way to protect Felison, the quickest and easiest way, was to brutally murder someone else, because that will cow the crowd and protect Felison. And he chose as his victim someone who would not survive. So murder is wrong. Let's be very clear about this. I'm not saying he did the right thing. This is not about right, wrong. This is looking at the morally gray areas, trying to understand motivations and trying to understand the questions that we are being asked. He murders someone who would have died anyway. He murders them in a brutal way to create an effect in the crowd in order to protect Felison. In law, we have a concept of self-defense of another. In order to defend someone else's life, you can, in those exceptional circumstances, be found innocent of murder because that was your motivation. Someone was going to die, you were trying to protect them, and because of that, you killed the perpetrator who was trying to kill them. But what Baudin does is not that, because the little old lady was not trying to kill Felison. So we see this reprehensible, dark, evil act, but it is not wholly evil. He wasn't doing it and going, I love murdering little old ladies by using a chain to saw off their heads. That's not what Baudin was doing. Baudin was doing it for a almost noble end. The next thing that I want to bring up about this is Baudin, it turns out, is a Talon. He is an assassin. Fantasy has a real problem with the morality of assassins. So many epic fantasies and genre fantasy texts have assassins as heroes or anti-heroes. Oh, look at how cool they are in a fight and how they kill all of these people. a lot of our media consumption is full of heroes who just go around murdering other people. We're okay with a certain level of violence and sociopathy in our heroes. Look at the whole superhero genre. The number of those heroes who just kill nameless guards because it's convenient. James Bond. Oh, look, I have to infiltrate this thing. There are some guards wandering around. I just shot them in the back of the head. We excuse a lot of that behavior because it's just part of our culture. We like violence. And we rarely confront the problematic nature of what an assassin actually is. Someone who is paid to murder people. And in fantasy, we tend to valorize it. One of the most popular characters in the Malazan world is Kalam, and he is an assassin. That's what he does. And we're okay with that. So Baudin, as an assassin, is not a good guy, is someone who is a professional killer who murders people. That's what he does. It's not a soldier about killing people in a fight to try and save your own life or the person standing next to you. This is someone who sneaks in somewhere and murders something. They are not good people. And yet we still, in a lot of media, try to valorize this. Oh, it's only bad people that this assassin murders. Even the story of Black Widow is all about her trying to make up for a lot of the evil stuff that she did in the past. As with Clint Barton, Hawkeye, he's trying to make up for evil stuff that he did in the past because he went around killing people. And typically killing people is not a good thing. So it's important to understand that Baudin is a professional trained killer. This is his job. This is how he looks at things. That is the gauge of his morality. He does bad things all the time and lives with it. He's good at it. That's what he does. So his morality, his personal morality, is not the same as ours. He's operating on a different scale. And that then asks us questions about whether someone's internal perception of what they do, if that is our gauge, or whether it's our external perception. Because again, this comes down to a point about very few people in history think of themselves as the villain of the story. The vast majority of us think of ourselves as the hero. No matter what we do, we rationalize or justify it in our head. We have reasons for why we did it that we think are explanatory or exculpatory, and justify our actions. That we convince ourselves of this because we like to think of ourselves as good people. And the reason that we had to do a bad thing was compelling enough for us to do the bad thing, even though we are good people. That is very, very common. So of course that has to be taken into consideration when we consider Baudin's actions. But now we get on to Baudin's relationship with Felison. And this is where it gets very, very complicated. So the first thing that I want to outline here is Felison is a young teenage girl. She has gone through horrendous trauma. She is a noble who's been sentenced into slavery and who has sold herself and her body to sailors and to the prison guards and has gone through awful trauma. She has become addicted to drugs because of this. She is trying to numb herself with the drugs because of this trauma. We can understand her position. we can understand that, yes, she acts out. She is cruel to other people. She says selfish and hurtful things because she is in enormous pain, enormous psychic pain. And it is perfectly normal to empathize with that position. But a lot of what she does, while she says to herself she is doing it for the protection of Hiboric and Baudin, some of it is because she wants more drugs. But it's a dual thing. She's helping them out, but she's getting what she wants as well. And also there's an element of Stockholm syndrome in what she does and in her relationships. So it's not as straightforward as Fellison is only doing this to help out Hiboric and Baudin. She is helping herself out as well, because while she's doing that, she's not being put in the mine. And admitting and acknowledging that there are selfish aspects to her actions is not in any way downplaying the abuse that she is undergoing and the damage that is being caused to her. But we shouldn't overlook it as an element. And when it comes to Baudin, a lot of the feeling is Baudin is not grateful for what Fellison is doing. And because we have Fellison's perspective, we get a lot of that information, but only from that perspective. We don't get it from Baudin's perspective. So what I want to do here is take a moment to think about this from Baudin's perspective. Baudin, as a professional assassin and claw, has been ordered to protect Fellison. The plan, as we well know, is this will only happen for a couple of weeks. That yes, they'll be put on the ship, they'll be sent to the camp, they'll be in the camp for a couple of weeks, and another ship is going to turn up and they will be broken out of the prison. That's the plan. As a professional assassin, as a spy, as a Talon, Baudin goes, right, so I have to pretend to be a slave for a couple of weeks to protect this snotty teenage noble. Right, fine, I'll do my job. Baudin is innocent. He is not a noble. He should not be rounded up with these people. He is not one of the agitators who has been arrested. This is a job for him where he has infiltrated the slave gang in order to protect Fellison. They arrive on the island, and of course, the insurrection happens, the rebellion happens, and suddenly, what should have been a 2-week job is now potentially stretching out for months. That's not what he signed up for. And whose fault is it? Well, the only reason he is there is Fellison. It's her fault. Now, again, I'm saying this is from Baudin's perspective. This is how he is thinking about the subject. Not that this is Fellison's fault. It's not Fellison's fault. I am talking about Baudin's feelings about it. So Baudin, as an innocent person, well, innocent insofar as he wasn't a noble and wasn't an agitator and shouldn't have been sent along with all of these things, but is there because of his job, his honor as a Talon, to follow the orders of a Talon master. He is now faced with, I'm meant to be looking after this spoiled noble girl, and all she does is she swans off to essentially the local bar to do drugs and drink and sleep with one of the senior slaves. Why am I breaking my back doing all this physical labor? I shouldn't be here. This should all have been handled weeks ago, and we're still here. So you can understand, if not necessarily condone, his position and understanding of what is happening. We then go through an entire sequence whereby Hiboric is getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And we know that Baudin has been coming in and looking after him, whereas Fellison, despite her intentions, sometimes loses track, and she gets shocked at seeing Hiboric and how badly he has degraded and sickened. She didn't realize he was that sick. Now, the only reason why she didn't realize is she hasn't been around as much as she thinks she has. Whereas Baudin clearly has been looking after Hiboric. So there is a bond developing between Baudin and Hiboric that Felison is not part of, because Baudin is there every day, Felison is not, which again is another element that builds toward resentment of Felison. So what we have within Baudin is a resentment toward someone who he sees as having it easy. She's sleeping around, she's getting drugs, she's drinking all the time, all the things that Baudin wants to do. And he is not extending to her the empathy and understanding that we as reader do, because he's not privileged to all of the things that are actually happening to her. Plus, he is resentful because he shouldn't even be there, because this should all be over, and Felison's the reason. So he's willing to view her actions in the worst possible light because it justifies his feelings of resentment. When we then have the breakout sequence and they get away from the camp, Baudin enacts revenge on the camp leader who has been taking advantage of Felison and filling her full of drugs and drink and raping her. He murders him because that is a punitive judgment and what he views as justice for someone who has done this to a teenage girl. He enacts justice. And there are other storylines in the Malazan Book of the Fallen where we see this sort of barbaric judge, jury, and executioner enacting a primeval and primitive justice on someone who we as readers feel deserves it. So he does that. Felison is not appreciative of that. Therefore, from his perspective, he's looking at her and going, you are driving me insane. You're the reason I'm stuck in a slave camp. You're the reason I've had to do all of these things. You're the reason I've been treated badly. You're the reason I'm not back home doing what I want to do. And when I go and take care of the guy who's been an evil person to you and has done these horrible things to you and gotten you hooked on drugs and hooked on alcohol, your response is to get annoyed at me. And so you can feel his resentment building up toward Felison. And yet he is still held in check. Because remember, he is a brutal assassin. If someone annoys him enough, he'll just kill them. That's how he deals with things. And yet with Felison, he does not kill her because it is his duty to look after her, to protect her. And he is doing it the best he can as a slave in a camp surrounded by guards and other slaves who are overseers. So he has very limited resources for these things. But even though he could break away at any point, escape at any point, he stays because of his loyalty, because of his job to protect her. So no matter how mean she is to him, no matter what she says, no matter what she does, Baudin still protects her. And so we have this very complicated notion of some of what he does is heroic and noble and good. He is sacrificing his own life. He is in captivity. He is not escaping. All of these things because he is trying to protect Felison. And because we are in Felison's perspective, we don't know about everything that Baudin has done to look after Hiboric, to firm up and protect their positions, to protect her at night, even when she's walking back. We have no idea about any of those things because we never see Baudin's perspective and Felison never thinks about them. So when they actually escape, he takes her with them. His plan, even though everything else has gone to hell, he creates a brand new plan, gets all three of them out, and she is still not appreciative of the fact that he has sacrificed his life and spent all of this time in captivity when he didn't have to be there. And then when he breaks her out, she's still not appreciative of what he has done. So as a human being, you can understand why he's annoyed, because remember, again, he is not privy to the information that we are privy to from Fellison's perspective. They then have this whole trek, and obviously Fellison and Baudin snipe at each other, and they are in dire straits. Very little food, very little water, surrounded on all sides by things that, they might just die. That is a highly stressful situation that exacerbates tensions. And eventually, when they find the sailors in the ship, what he sees is Fellison immediately falling back on, well, I'm just going to go and sleep with these people. And you can imagine Baudin's disgust and pain that he has suffered so much and protected her for so long. And this is what he is protecting, that he is annoyed and angry. Even if, and I have to keep stressing this is Baudin's perspective of the events, not what the events are, and it is not taking account of Fellison's perspective. And when Fellison crawls into his tent with a knife in an attempt to kill him after he has saved her repeatedly and protected her repeatedly and suffered slavery because of her, and all of these privations because of her, and the abuse that she has hurled at him, she crawls into his tent with a knife and says that she wants to sleep with him. And of course, he's looking at her going, you're just saying that. I know that you have a knife and I know that you're going to try and kill me. And Fellison then tries to kill him. And this is a point we often overlook, because what Baudin does next is reprehensible, because he rapes her. He has sex with her against her will. She does not consent to the sex. But Baudin looks at it as, you just tried to kill me. You offered to have sex with me. Therefore, you're going to make good on your offer. And he takes out his frustration on her. This is an evil act. But is Baudin irredeemably evil? Well, he's a murderer. He's an assassin. Is that the thing that makes him irredeemably evil? He's killed lots of people. Does that make him irredeemably evil? Or is this the one thing that makes him irredeemably evil? What is the morality at play here? Remember that Fellison was caught in attempted murder. Now, when we have seen other people do horrendous and evil things, and someone has enacted a punitive, barbaric justice, we have celebrated, because yes, that they deserve that. And here we have someone trying to commit murder, and the assassin that she is trying to murder does not kill her, which he could easily have done. He just rapes her. And the word just there is the problem. Do we view those two crimes as synonymous, as one bigger than the other? Erikson does not offer an answer to this. He is not suggesting that what Baudin does is right, nor is he suggesting what Fellison does is right. He is presenting an extreme situation to test how we think about morality, because only in these very extreme situations can we see that ordinarily, oh, stealing is wrong. Yeah, my family's starving. I'm Jean Valjean. I'll steal a loaf of bread to feed me and my starving family. We can see, oh, that's sort of complex. But in this situation, these are two people who basically are both in the wrong. One is a teenage girl who we feel far more sympathy for, and who we have been following from her perspective and therefore identify more with, whereas Baudin has been cold and aloof and distant the entire time, so we have a lack of empathy for his position. And yet when we think about what he has gone through, he has also been traumatized and also suffered a huge amount, all for the sake of this person who is then trying to kill him. Again, I am not excusing his behavior, but the morality at play here is very complex. We then have Fellowson order Baudin away, that he isn't going to accompany them anymore. And this is after, like, he saved her life yet again and again. Baudin continually saves and protects Fellowson throughout the entire novel without any thanks from her. But eventually, Fellowson sends Baudin away. And when Fellowson and Hiboric and Culp meet with Grillin, and Grillin attacks them and eats and devours Culp and is attacking Fellowson, Baudin, who could have left them behind, he was ordered away. His protectee no longer needed his protection anymore. She made it very clear. She's been mean and nasty. He has been tracking them the entire time. He hasn't had the protection that Culp has been expanding over the rest of the group. He has survived on his own, constantly tracking them, keeping out of sight, protecting them from other dangers in the desert, just as he has done all the way through. And when Grillin attacks, he rushes past and attacks Grillin. He attacks this supernatural monster that he has no way of defeating in order to protect Fellowson. And he sacrifices his life for her because that was his job. She is his protectee, no matter all the things that she has done and all the things that he thinks about her. That is what he is there to do, and he is honor bound to do it. And that is why that moment when he lays his head in her lap and she's holding him, and he says that Fellowson was not who he expected, that in this moment at the end, when he is dying and sacrificed his life for her, he realizes he misjudged Fellowson and he didn't take her perspective into account. And Fellowson, in that moment, forgives him. Fellowson forgives him. And yet we as readers find it almost impossible to forgive Baudin for the rape. And this is why I find Baudin a fascinating character, because his actions, that storyline, poses such difficult questions for our perception of ethics and morality, and says a lot about how external perspectives and internal perspectives can change and warp circumstances. And justifications are not set in stone, but are going to be powered by individual perspective. And I know this is a very difficult and emotive subject. Dealing with any of these very dark aspects of Malazan are complex and difficult. And it's not part of the happy, smiley, oh, yeah, look, they just go and blew things up, and that's funny. But I think this is one of the things that helps the Malazan Book of the Fallen transcend a lot of other fantasy literature that does not delve into the morality and psychology and ramifications of this kind of world. We're so used to action assassins who run around and kill lots of people, and they're the heroes, where assassins are venerated and cool. And, oh, look, he just slaughtered 1,000 people. I wonder, can he slaughter 1,000 more? And we look at it in terms of spectacle, of blood and circuses. And Erikson actually poses a much more complex question about the levels of morality, about these very dark aspects of human behavior and our self-justifications, and then asks the question, can you ever forgive someone? So are some acts so base that they, no matter how good the rest of your life has been, all of the good deeds that you have committed, that you can never be redeemed? Or even after committing a bad act, can you never serve a penance and try to redeem yourself and try to correct a wrong? Because you cannot travel back in time. You cannot take it back. All you can do is try to live your life better. But will that ever be enough? And there is no definitive answer in the text. We know that Malazan forgives him. But Erikson never says that the reader should. And that's what I find so interesting about Baudin's story. But I hope you've not necessarily enjoyed this one, but at least find it interesting, because I think it's complex. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for your continued support, and I'll see you in the next one.